Eu costumo dizer que eu amo o mar. É o meu silêncio, é onde eu gosto de estar mesmo. Sim, passei horas da minha vida simplesmente a ouvir escorrer e a observar a escorrer a água no rio e nas plantas. As pradarias são um habitat incrível. Eu, quando mergulho naquele verde,
Growing up by the sea, I always spent a lot of time there playing as a child, and it's really fascinating with this sort of underwater world that is so close but we know so little about.
There are more species, significantly more species in the seagrass than on just sand without structure, without a 3D structure.
There's a lot living in the eelgrass meadows. It's really site-specific and context-dependent, so it's really hard to find like general patterns, even within a small area. So the meadows are quite unique from each other.
Seagrasses produce a lot of services. They have a lot of benefits.
And they are important nursery ground for many fish species. So compared to a naked seafloor, you have more sort of diversity of habitat available, which creates room for more species.
Juvenile stages of adult fish, for example, and adult animals, they have higher survival inside the seagrass bed than if there was no seagrass bed. So they would be found by predators, they would be eaten, they would not survive for as long. So basically it means that then you have higher numbers of adult fish because more of the small ones survived until adulthood.
We've been studying the ichthyofauna, the fish of the Ria Formosa lagoon, since 2001. We started off with a project funded by the European Commission using all kinds of gears and sampling different types of habitat, seagrass, soft bottom, deep water channels, shallow channels, etc. And we found that the habitat that had the greatest, by far the greatest diversity in terms of fish species and in terms of biomass was the seagrass.
They are really hot spots for carbon sequestration.
If this organic matter is stored without being decomposed, this is a carbon sink. And this is what happens in the sediment of seagrasses.
Zostera marina is a very cosmopolitan species, so it's very tolerant to different salinities, different temperatures, but the climate is changing really fast.
During the last century, there were large losses of seagrasses.
Hoje o mar está vazio e se continuarmos a usar técnicas que destroem os fundos marinhos, dia o mar se calhar já não se vai chamar mar.
Seagrasses that have been living for centuries, decades, millennia, they can be damaged so quickly by someone just going there and exploiting them and destroying them. And we know that they will never make it back and they will never recover in the scale, in the time frame of human generations.
Restoration is about getting back destroyed or deteriorated ecosystem, but to just plant out eelgrass somewhere where we don't know whether it has been before, it's not really restoration if you're replacing one habitat with another.
And if we can reverse the decline in seagrass, that can only be positive.
Start conserving or managing seagrass ecosystems before you have to restore them.
By conserving, we are conserving decades, centuries of evolution.
Eu adorava poder ver oceano a pulular de vida.
It's so much faster to destroy than to conserve.
I would like to be more optimistic, but if this goes on like this, I'm not very hopeful.
A puzzling predicament in Southwest Florida. Large amounts of seagrass are floating up to the surface of our rivers.
Seagrass is a climate superhero. They're one of the least protected ecosystems in the world.
Well, experts say the tangled roots of seagrasses are estimated to hold more than 10% of the carbon buried in ocean sediment every year.
Eelgrass meadows have declined in size by more than 50%.
The seagrass is dying, and that's impacting an entire ecosystem.
Those grasses had nearly been depleted.
Important part of Maine's fisheries is quickly disappearing, and it's worrying scientists.
The grass not only provides food and shelter for wildlife, but it also helps clean the water.
Now, dedicated scientists say there are early signs of hope.
Bora lá dar 5 na cena? I've started in marine conservation by working in a project, a life project, that started in 2007. And the focus was to recover a lost seagrass meadow in a marine protected area. And this for me was somehow attractive, and in a personal view was beautiful to be underwater and see those magnificent seagrass meadows with all the marine life associated.
It was around the 80s when the huge meadow that was here in Portinho started to decline, and when the project started, there was none.
When I started in the protected area in Arrábida, there was no seagrasses present when we started this project, so it was very challenging because of that.
Mostly, I think they were from CCMAR, that they were planting seagrasses over 3 or 4 years, almost continuously.
I do remember the place with seagrasses before the project. Actually, I learned how to dive in this area. I have very dear memories of me and my father diving in those seagrass meadows when I was 9 years old. I do have these memories to see what is a beautiful seagrass meadow in an ocean environment. It was not a marine protected area at this time, and unfortunately I have observed the degradation of these habitats.
Quem por aqui cresceu, e fomos muitos, nada igual ao que era há 50 anos atrás, mas já se nota diferenças.
But when I started to be involved with marine conservation was exactly in this place, and it was very sad to start to work in a place that I knew before, which was so exuberant and so thrilling with marine life, and now it was a desert.
O primeiro projeto Biomares, com o Diogo, Paulo e toda a doutora Alexandre, até esse projeto. E vieram plantas. Eles carregavam aquilo durante a noite, chegavam cá, descarregavam, iam descansar, no outro dia já estavam dentro de água para as plantar, porque fizeram um armazém debaixo de água, com aquilo tudo ali preso, para depois ir fazer esse trabalho.
Some restoration is needed because there's nothing there if the species is extinct. That was our case when we restored the seagrass in the Arrábida Marine Park. The species was extinct, so by introducing it there, it has been growing naturally, and the pressures that had damaged it were eliminated by the management plan.
We were able to overcome those challenges. It took us years, so there were many failed attempts, and this was also a test of our own resilience, and not only the plant resilience to try to create the seagrass meadow from scratch, but also the human resilience that we kept on having motivation to develop the correct techniques.
Foram feitas muitas experiências, foram feitas coisas incríveis, mas é ótimo que se continue a investir, porque eu acredito, nem que seja daqui a 50 anos, eu não estou cá para ver, mas há que estar alguém, não é? Acho que é isso que é importante, é não desistir e continuar o trabalho.
Initially, because the area where the seagrass was lost was huge, with hectares. And so we thought by spreading the plantation a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there would be the best strategy to eventually let them grow and coalesce and make a very large area. By fragmenting the seagrass, it became less resilient because the rhizome network was broken, and eventually the winter storms removed the last beads. So the last beads were not removed by boats or by human pressure, was because they had been so fragmented and became so small that the small little pieces ended up being uprooted by water motion. But the one that survived was a plot where they had been planted all together. And then we learned, let's do an experiment and test this.
And in the end, we were successful, and nowadays we have positively impacted an area of more than 1,000 square meters.
And we're happy to say that the extinct seagrass was reintroduced, and it's been there ever since, and is still there after at least 17 years by now.
So in Ria Formosa, the ecosystem is way more variable, more heterogeneous, if I can say a big word.
Ria Formosa is a lagoon, so there's no freshwater input, and therefore the salinity is more or less the same as the ocean.
There is a lot of differences in between channels of Ria Formosa. It's not all the same. Close to the inlets, you have certain conditions of current and water turbidity and different temperature that you don't have in more inland channels, more close to the cities like Faro or Olhão.
And there are 3 species of seagrass. One of them is intertidal, so you can see it when it's at low tide. The other 2 are subtidal.
And when I started, there was seagrass meadows of big areas, but there was lack of knowledge. We started to follow up on those seagrass meadows, and we have seen a decline, a very big decline. But this raises a big alarm, which means that if these seagrasses disappear, we lose the biggest seagrass population in the country. We have lost until today more than 50% of the seagrasses. So in total, we have around 70 acres of seagrasses in Ria Formosa, which is pretty much half of what we had in 2014. So we need to do all of our efforts to preserve and to maintain these seagrass meadows here in Ria Formosa.
Like restoration is about getting back destroyed or deteriorated ecosystem, and it's quite time consuming. So if you have good baseline data and know that, okay, in this area the grass has actually been lost, then it's higher chances of being successful.
In terms of restoration, what is really possible at large scale is passive restoration. Is basically discover why did species go extinct.
What are the environmental conditions that promote natural recovery? Because restoration is really expensive and has a quite low success rate, it's good to understand what we can do to improve the chances of the seagrass recovering naturally.
What we need is to create the conditions where there's no disturbance, and naturally the populations can recover.
Restoration is difficult, and so the easiest way is to stop the decline, to stop the disturbances. Restoration is expensive, it's difficult, but it's possible.
when we went to this Restore Seagrass project, the mindset was, we already know how to restore. We don't need any more proofs of concept. We need to bring this into a larger scale. To bring seagrass restoration to a larger scale, you need two things. First of all, preserve the seagrasses that you have. And this is what I've just mentioned on the case of Ria Formosa. So we need to preserve what we have. Second, we need to have enough donor populations so that we can go to these donor populations and use part of this biomass to transplant in areas which were affected and are still in a point that we can restore and recover.
Yeah, so presently the transplants are done by bringing the sediment together with the seagrass and planting a large minimum area that was already tested previously to be resistant to winter storms, grazing, and all these pressures that are affecting the seagrass as they are transplanted in very small amounts.
The resources that it takes to do it, because you have to manually collect the plants and plant them out using scuba divers. It takes time and money to do.
There's no magic here. They used to be hectares, and so if we expect them to recover the size that they used to have, we cannot go and transplant from another population the same amount of the hectares that existed there. We'll be having a huge impact on another population.
It's a bit random whether the eelgrass will survive or not. That first initial stage is quite vulnerable to storm events that could sort of remove all the seagrass. So easier to restore or protect or keep the eelgrass in an area that is protected than in an area where you have a lot of human activity.
The big issue is the scale. Ria Formosa is very big, with many channels and with many municipalities, with many stakeholders. So the problem in Ria Formosa, it's mainly human. It's the human usages in the system.
In the lagoon itself, we have several problems that affect the seagrass. One is especially in the intertidal zone, there's a lot of human activity, digging for clams, and that destroys the seagrass.
As I mentioned this part about the protection, if you're able to either do it in a protected area or make sure that there are protections in place before starting a project.
There's a canal all along the Ilha Deserta. That particular part of the Ria has a special protected status. But even so, we could see that the whole intertidal zone was dug up. The seagrass was in a very poor state.
Sometimes it's difficult to convince people to change their habits because they feel they are losing some right they have. Nature has the right to exist here. It's nature's home, right? We are invading its home and taking the resources for our own benefit.
A lot of people depend on seagrass biodiversity for subsistence all over their countries, all over the planet.
Here in Ria Formosa, this is the major problem. It's the conflict in between users and with users and nature.
There's a lot of boating activity. Boats, the engines can destroy seagrass.
So what we also need is to have surveillance, and we need to have law enforcement to prevent these illegal activities to impact the seagrass meadows.
My impression in general is there's already a lot of good laws, but then they are not really enforced. So if the law exists, it cannot be enforced because there's not enough information. We need to develop that information and give that information to the authorities so that they can do it properly.
We need them to understand the lagoon is very important, the health of the lagoon is very important.
It just takes one boat, one guy who decides to be the nasty one and go and destroy everything.
Se houvesse alguma coisa que nós pudéssemos parar em primeiro lugar, era a pesca de arrastão. É uma pesca que destrói o fundo marinho, destrói toda a capacidade do mar é algo que eu acho que tem que se acabar imediatamente e procurar alternativas, diversificar a atividade.
The problem is really controlling the fishing gear that damages them.
So these impacts from fishing need to be taken. We need to take some care when we say this, because not all fishing activities are impacting the seagrass meadows.
Some fishing activity is allowed. There is licensed. Local fishermen can use a certain amount of trammel nets, for example, but most fishing gear is not allowed, especially fine mesh gear like beach seines or bottom trolls, beam trolls, for example, are not allowed.
Quando para o lixo da mariscagem foi fácil convencer as comunidades a mudar o hábito, aqui na questão da mariscagem não está a ser tão fácil. Primeiro porque eles têm a crença de que esta atividade não faz mal às pradarias. 2, porque estamos a falar de uma atividade que garante o seu ganha-pão, não é como o lixo.
When you use beach seines and beam trolls, you catch juvenile fish. If you go to the market, the fish markets in Orléans, you see species that could only have been caught in the lagoon and could only have been caught with these illegal gears.
Se eles estiverem à pesca, ali ao pé da anicha, com uma rede que seja legal, não ali porque ali é proibido, mas que seja legal, o que é que ele vai apanhar? Uma multa. A multa é tão pequena que ele no outro dia volta ao mesmo sítio e já pagou.
A single cohort, 1-year class, can produce millions if they are allowed to grow and reach a size that they can be caught.
If we do allow these ecosystems to disappear, this will come with a big cost in terms of biodiversity to Ria Formosa and directly into the sources that we like to explore.
It's a resource that belongs to everybody. It belongs to the world. It doesn't belong to one person that decides to take the future from everyone else.
Então, barco apreendido e os materiais todos estão no barco. O senhor ia pensar 2 vezes se queria continuar a pesca e se queria continuar a fazer isso. E passava a mensagem aos outros.
It's not necessarily that we need more laws. We need enforcement of the laws. And then when something happens, this needs to have consequences.
But there is one thing that I've seen, and we also have data for that, and this is worrying, which is the presence of invasive species.
We now have a problem of an invasive species of algae, and it occupies the space, and it's not such a good habitat for fish as the seagrass.
And this algae is called Caulerpa prolifera, and it is widely spread today in Ria Formosa. It appeared in 2013 in a small patch close to Tavira, in Fuzeta, and now it's spread towards Ria Formosa in all directions, at all depths.
Seagrass has more complexity. The seagrass is tall, it offers protection, food. Caulerpa is very shallow.
And this can also limit the capacity of these seagrasses to expand and to grow because they're competing with another species.
Caulerpa prolifera is a green seaweed. It creates rhizomes with what looks like roots and can compete for nutrients, for example, and make the life of the seagrasses a little bit more difficult.
Because you have the seagrass here, and then you have the kelp, and you have the other algae. And there's not like one is more important than the other. They're more like acting as a mosaic of habitats.
Species adapt. In my studies, I already consider Caulerpa as an habitat because Caulerpa is already part of the ecosystem.
Kind of trying to treat them more as blue forests, which includes seagrass and macroalgae and kelp and everything else, rather than just the eelgrass.
The more we know about the species that live in seagrass and in Caulerpa, so in what ways the species are affected by Caulerpa, the better we can protect not only seagrasses but also fish species and commercial fish species.
Because having just eelgrass isn't great. You want the eelgrass and the kelp and all the different habitats.
By the sheer size of the expansion of Caulerpa here in the Ria Formosa, personally I don't think there is anything that we can do to remove the Caulerpa. However, I think we can focus, and that would be the most productive thing, is to focus on preserving and on the conservation of the native habitats that we have. Not everything is bad. Sometimes we can find a brighter side to the story. The seahorses have been declining in the Ria Formosa for a long time. We already lost about 90% of the original population. We had one of the largest populations in the world here in the Ria Formosa lagoon, and they declined about 90%. And we found that by increasing that vegetation, that increases their predation success as we were expecting. We were not expecting that caulerpa played the same role as seagrasses. So by increasing the vegetation of both seagrasses and caulerpa, they both play an equal good role in providing camouflage or shelter for the seahorses to protect their prey. But we are only talking about the structural complexity of the invasive caulerpa. Naturally, we are not taking in consideration other problems that may surge.
These standing biomass that you can find on wetlands and on seagrass specific, due not just to the below biomass, but the above ground biomass. It also has a fantastic property which is attenuating the wave energy and the density of the roots of the rhizomes that they have below the ground. It helps to trap the sediment that is arriving at that place. Wave that can come from boats, boat wakes, or waves that can come from storms, so it dissipates the waves arriving at a certain place.
They act like a natural defense structures against coastal inundation and also coastal erosion. When there are storms, the water would go more inland.
And it's even been combined, for instance, with nourishments, the implementation of seagrasses together with the sediment nourishment to enhance the property of attenuation, in this case of wave.
Later, there was the water frame directive in place, and in this directive, seagrasses were an indicator of the status of the water quality. So all the countries, they had to monitor the status of their seagrasses. At the European scale, the rates of loss of seagrasses have decreased, mostly because the water quality of the coastal areas have improved, and this has helped to reduce the loss rate of the vegetation. These kind of ecosystems are accumulating carbon during the life of the ecosystem. This is where the biggest stocks of carbon in seagrasses are. It's in the sediment. During their life, they have been accumulating carbon. They accumulate organic matter in the sediment. So if we lose this vegetation, all these stores of carbon could be emitted, and then we would have more CO2 in the atmosphere.
How the stalks form, they're mostly in the sediment rather than the eelgrass itself. And it's all the detritus that ends up trapped in the seagrass that comes to the bottom and is stuck there and is absorbed into the sediment.
These habitats, these ecosystems can store carbon for centuries or thousands of years. This is very important, of course, because this is potentially a nature-based solution to reduce CO2 concentration in the atmosphere.
Because we do have the knowledge and we do have the long track on these systems. We know how they evolve, or at least we know how they evolve to a given certain pressures.
There are meadows that are really sequestering a lot of carbon. With the time, we can see the rate, or we can estimate the rate of carbon accumulation in the sediment of the meadow. We do all this work by diving. So we hammer PVC tubes and extract them with all the sediment that is inside. This carbon that has been buried during the last 100 years, it is only on the top 20 to 40 centimeters of sand.
If this organic matter is stored without being decomposed, this is a carbon sink. And this is what happens in the sediment of seagrasses.
Then we open the core in the lab, or in collaboration with experts from labs that they do this analysis. They analyze a radioisotope, or the amount of radioactivity that it has along depth of the core. They can infer an estimation of an age of this sediment, of the entire core. And then we slice the sediment inside this pipe every centimeter, and this would be our samples along the core. For us, it's very important to have this time on the core, and then another set of analysis is the carbon. We analyze how much carbon is in each of these slices, organic carbon.
Seagrasses have declined in the order of 40% in the last century and a half or 2 centuries. You can imagine that we lost 40% of the ability to capture CO2 from the atmosphere. And even worse is that the sediment, the carbon that was accumulated in the sediments, when these seagrasses decline, it gets released again. So, yeah.
We need to be here, and we need to hear the communities that daily live from being at the same place that the seagrasses. So we need to hear them and help and use them also as another tool to map the evolution of these ecosystems.
Education is the best tool to conserve. We cannot have a police behind every plant, making sure that no one touches it. It has to be that the people love it, understand why it's important.
To prevent the loss of these habitats, people have to understand their importance. We have to work on some other kind of education, and you have to work on the people feelings.
If they understand it and they understand why it's important, they're going to like it and they're going to be defending them.
People will only protect the environment when they feel wonder. When a person is emotionally involved with the environment or with anything really, then that person will fight for it.
Não é no computador que nós mudamos as coisas, é mesmo estando com as pessoas, ouvindo-as e criando empatia.
The best is to actually go there hands-on and take the children snorkeling on the seagrass and show them how they grow and have them help to transplant a little piece and see it growing.
The education system has to take people into the nature and outside the classroom, right? Seeing videos or reading about nature on a book. That's something that
we're used to see the fish dead on the market or on the plate, and if you go and see the fish while they're swimming, live, looking at you, living in the seagrass, you will have a different connection.
So people have to be out in the field, have to be, the professors have to know about nature and get the students excited about it.
And you will think, no, I want to conserve this habitat because I've seen it and I know it. You get an emotional connection. So I think developing the emotional connection with the ecosystems and seeing things the way they live and understanding their lives.
Estando presentes, mostrando que é diferente, envolvendo, por exemplo, vamos fazer uma ação de limpeza, estando presente e estamos ali a falar e a mostrar o que é que estamos a fazer.
There has to be an educational aspect of this. The local fishermen and users, stakeholders need to know how important the seagrass is and how important the lagoon, the Ria Formosa, is.
Sei lá, eu já pensei, um dia que tenha ali um grupo de pescadores, eu vou-me sentar lá embaixo ao pé deles e depois vou-lhes perguntar se eles têm noção daquilo que estão a deixar para trás, o que é que aquilo faz mal. Se calhar não sabem.
As comunidades costeiras, piscatórias, sabem quais são os fundos que lhe dão pesca.
The coastal communities that we've been talking to, in general, recognize immediately the benefits of the seagrass.
Daí até à consciência da sua proteção, há um fator-chave no meio, que é a falta de condições com que eles vivem, seja no reconhecimento da profissão, seja na falta de condições básicas para a vida.
Para nos respeitarmos a nós e para que nos respeitem a nós temos que respeitar o que está à nossa volta, não é? A minha liberdade não pode interferir na liberdade dos outros.
A vida de um pescador local é muito arriscada e não tem apoio. A venda dos seus produtos depende de um leilão, que ainda por cima começa do preço mais alto para o preço mais baixo.
Todas as pessoas têm que comer. Epá, mas vão plantar batatas também. Eles não plantam nada, só tiram. Se eu não apanhar, apanha outro. Então, mas aquela teoria que o meu pai me ensinou, deixa crescer porque ele vai pôr ovinhos e não sei o quê, depois nós vamos apanhar mais, já não existe? Pelo amor de Deus, a natureza tem que ter o seu ritmo, não é que só tirar.
E neste momento estamos a auscultar os próprios mariscadores de qual é a sua percepção sobre o impacto da mariscagem nas pradarias. E o mais interessante disto tudo é, de facto, a educação.
Então, como é que se chamam aqueles pigmentos que estão dentro das paredes celulares, das células, para dar a cor verde às plantas?
Há muito para reinventar para que os pescadores possam, pela sua iniciativa, começar a ter consciência da proteção.
So we have to explain that these are here because they will protect it's like a maternity, right? They will, a nursery. They'll have the little babies of the fish, they will grow here and then you'll have more adult fish that you can fish outside and catch outside.
Em vez de que o pescador é aquele que pesca no mar, passar aquele que vive do mar. E isso significa diversificar a atividade, em vez de ser uma atividade puramente extrativa, passar, por exemplo, a fazer atividades educativas e de turismo.
Devíamos estar melhores, devíamos ser pessoas melhores em relação à natureza que não temos.
Quando eles nos dão espaço e nos deixam mostrar as ilustrações que temos e as imagens, no final, a maior parte destas pessoas ou já põe em causa ou já afirma que eles estão a causar um problema ou que potencialmente poderiam estar a causar um problema. E de facto então a educação é imensa, é uma chave incrível para mudar o mundo.
E também gosto de uma teoria dos escoteiros, é que onde vamos deixamos sempre melhor do que aquilo que encontramos. Portanto, se vamos a algum lado e encontramos qualquer coisa que não é dali, vamos levar aquela coisinha, aquele papelinho, aquele plástico.
É muito importante nós conseguirmos envolvê-los, mesmo que eles sejam contra. Mas isto é como lá em casa, mesmo que os nossos filhos sejam contra, nós sabemos que aquela semente vai lá ficar e eu gosto disso.
These ecosystems are really important not only for me as a person, but for everyone, because they are really the house of many species that we depend for our daily life, and they protect our shorelines, they stabilize the sediments. They have so many important roles in the ecosystem that are affecting positively our life.
We have to do many things at the same time, restore, but also reducing the pressure. So it's not enough to plant out if you keep on putting pollutants and nutrients into the water.
It's not to say that you shouldn't restore, but I think we should intervene before we need to restore.
The actions that we take now, it will allow to continue enjoying and having these ecosystems or not.
And if we can reverse the decline in seagrass and increase the area of subtidal seagrass, create more habitat for juvenile fish, that can only be positive, that can only result in greater production and future yield for the commercial fisheries.
And so the easiest way is to stop the disturbances that led to the decline of seagrasses. salt marshes and mangroves. So this is the first thing.
The future generations, the young generations, if they are well informed and if they are aware of what were the baselines of the past and how their role for the future, they feel that this is theirs and their responsibility, I'm hopeful that the next generation will do better than we did.
I just hope that this documentary can bring awareness to people that their actions can damage these ecosystems.
Stop putting out harbors in eelgrass meadows or pumping out sewage close to an eelgrass meadow.
I hope that people are sensitive enough to be able to change a little bit their behavior of small, very moderate changes they can do in their habits that will have a very positive impact in these ecosystems.
Em Setúbal nós temos um dos melhores mercados de peixe do mundo e quando vamos ao mercado, de repente parece que o mar está cheio de peixe. Mas a verdade e a mensagem que eu gostaria mais de transmitir é que o mar está vazio e que o que nós podemos fazer hoje é, em primeiro lugar, não perder o que ainda cá está.
It's good to restore, but it's the most important and easiest is to keep what we already have.
What were the most rewarding moments that you have in your mind?
For me, it's going to a habitat and swimming over the seagrass and knowing this was extinct and it's here because some time ago we wrote the project and started doing this and we believed and everyone said, oh, that's going to be impossible on the open coast and it got damaged with the storm and we didn't give up and we decided let's try and make it better. We learned a lesson, let's do it in a different way.
It's an area which is poorly financed. Personally, I continue to be very motivated to try to do something that in the end of the day I can say that I did my best to change the ecosystems for a better outcome.
So I'm so happy to see going there and seeing all the seahorses swimming in the seagrass and the pipefish and all these little animals.
We want with this documentary also to go a little bit into the people's eyes directly and feed them with really nice images that can motivate them to preserving seagrass meadows. Because when people feel that they like something, they also feel they want to protect it, right? And maybe we can do some tricks like utilize the seahorse as a flag organism because seahorse depends greatly on seagrass meadows here in Ria Formosa, and to try to utilize other organisms associated with the seagrasses to try to reach people's hearts and people's mind a little bit better in a way that they want to protect these ecosystems.